The transport ship descended through the purple clouds of Valoria Prime, and Commander Nathan Cole watched the alien world grow larger through his window, his heart beating with a mixture of excitement and nervousness that he had not felt since his first day at the military academy back on Earth. He had spent 3 weeks preparing for this mission, reading every report about the Valorian species, studying their culture and their history, trying to understand a civilization that had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves and hunting with stone spears. The Valorians were impressive in every way that mattered to most species in the galaxy, and Nathan knew he would need to earn their respect through actions rather than words. The ship landed softly on a platform made of white crystal that seemed to glow from within, and Nathan gathered his single bag of personal belongings before walking down the ramp into the warm air of an alien world. 2 Valorian guards stood waiting for him, and Nathan had to stop himself from staring at them because they were unlike anything he had ever seen in person. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with silver blue skin that shimmered like metal under the 3 suns of their home system, and their eyes were deep violet, holding an intelligence that seemed ancient and cold at the same time. "Commander Cole," one of them said in perfect English, "you are expected at the Grand Council Hall, and we will escort you there now." Nathan nodded and followed them through streets that looked more like art museums than pathways, with buildings that curved and flowed like frozen water, and gardens filled with plants that sang soft melodies when the wind touched their leaves. The Valorians they passed barely glanced at him, and when they did, Nathan saw the same expression on every face. Mild curiosity mixed with something that looked very much like pity. He understood why they looked at him that way, because to them, humans were children who had only recently discovered how to leave their home planet, a species so young that their entire recorded history was shorter than the reign of a single Valorian emperor. Grand Council Hall was the largest building Nathan had ever entered, with ceilings so high that clouds actually formed inside, and walls covered in crystals that displayed images from Valorian history, stretching back thousands and thousands of years. A single Valorian female waited for him in the center of the vast chamber, and Nathan recognized her immediately from the briefings as High Counselor Valar Sinthus, the most powerful political leader in the entire Valorian collective. She was beautiful in the way that a glacier is beautiful, cold and ancient and utterly beyond anything as simple as human standards of attraction, and her violet eyes studied Nathan with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. "Commander Cole," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, "welcome to Valoria Prime, and thank you for answering our request for assistance." Nathan saluted in the human, military fashion before speaking. "High Counselor, it is an honor to be here, and I hope I can provide the training your people need." Before Valar could respond, a younger voice cut through the air, filled with amusement and mockery. "So this is the great human warrior that Mother has been telling everyone about." Nathan turned to see a young Valorian female entering the hall from a side door, and he could immediately see the resemblance to Valara in her features, though her expression held none of her mother's dignity or restraint. This had to be Lyra, the High Counselor's daughter, and Nathan had been warned about her during his briefings because she was known throughout the diplomatic corps as difficult and disrespectful towards species she considered beneath. Her Lyra walked in a slow circle around Nathan, looking him up and down like someone examining a strange animal at a zoo. "He is so small," she said with a laugh. "And look at his skin, so soft and fragile. I could probably break him with one hand." Nathan remained at attention, keeping his expression neutral, even as the young Valorian continued her inspection. "Mother says you are here to teach us how to fight on the ground like primitives," Lyra continued, "which seems rather pointless since we have weapons that can destroy entire cities from orbit. But I suppose humans have to feel useful somehow. She stopped directly in front of Nathan and leaned down to look into his eyes. Her violet gaze filled with contempt. Tell me, little human, what could you possibly teach a species that was building starships when your ancestors were still afraid of fire? Nathan said nothing because he had dealt with people like Lyra before, young and privileged and convinced that they understood everything about the universe without ever having faced real hardship. Lyra. The single word from Valara cut through the air like a blade, and Nathan saw something flicker across the young Valorian's face. A brief moment of surprise followed by defiance. I was simply asking our guest a question. Mother, you were being rude and disrespectful, Valara said, her voice cold enough to freeze water. And you will stop immediately. Lyra rolled her eyes in a gesture that seemed to be universal across all species in the galaxy. I do not understand why we need this human here at all. We have the most advanced military technology in 12 star systems, and our shields can stop any weapon the Keth can throw at us. You will show Commander Cole respect, Valara said, and there was something in her tone that made even Nathan stand a little straighter. That is not a request, daughter. It is a command from your High Counselor. Lyra stared at her mother for a long moment, clearly unused to being spoken to in such a manner. He's just a soldier. Mother, a common fighter from a primitive species. Why should I show him any special respect? Valara moved then, crossing the distance between herself and her daughter in 3 quick strides. And when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the entire hall, because this common soldier from a primitive species represents knowledge that could save billions of Valorian lives. Because while we were busy feeling superior to every other species in the galaxy, we forgot a simple truth that humans have never forgotten. And what truth is that? Lyra asked, some of the arrogance fading from her voice. That sometimes the enemy does not stay in space where your orbital weapons can reach them, Valara said. Sometimes the enemy lands on your worlds and walks among your people, and when that happens, all the advanced technology in the universe means nothing if you do not know how to fight them face to face. She turned to Nathan, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that looked like pain. Come with me. Commander Cole, there is something I must show you. Something that will help you understand why you are truly here, and why my daughter will learn to treat you with the respect you deserve. Nathan followed the High Counselor toward a doorway at the far end of the hall, leaving Lyra standing alone in the vast chamber. Her expression confused and uncertain for the first time since Nathan had arrived. He did not know what Valara wanted to show him, but something told him that it would change everything he thought. He knew about the Valorians and their desperate need for human help. The corridor Valara led Nathan through was completely different from everything else he had seen on Valoria Prime. And the change was so sudden that it almost felt like stepping into another world entirely, where the rest of the capital city was bright and beautiful and filled with light. This passage was dark and silent, with walls made of black stone that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect. Its small blue flames burned in recesses along the floor, casting strange shadows that danced and flickered as Nathan walked past them. This is the path of silence, Valara said, her voice soft and heavy with emotion. It is the most sacred place on all of Valoria Prime, and very few outsiders have ever been permitted to walk here. Nathan remained quiet because he understood that this was not a moment for words. The path continued for what felt like several minutes, winding deeper and deeper into some underground portion of the Grand Council Hall, until finally it opened into a vast circular chamber that made Nathan stop and stare in amazement and horror. The ceiling rose so high above them that it disappeared into darkness, and the walls were covered in names. Millions upon millions of names written in silver script that glowed faintly in the dim light of the chamber in. The center stood a single statue carved from the same black stone as the walls. depicting a Valorian warrior holding an ancient weapon, his face frozen in an expression of fierce determination. "What is this place?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is the memorial of Centaura Prime," Valara said, and Nathan could hear the pain in every word she spoke. 53 years ago, before you were born, the Keth came to our colony world of Centaura Prime. She walked slowly toward the statue, her silver-blue skin looking almost gray in the dim light. 70 million of our people lived there. Commander, families and children and artists and scientists. People who had never harmed anyone and who believed that our advanced technology would always keep them safe. Nathan felt a cold weight settling in his stomach because he had read about the Keth during his mission preparation, and he knew they were not like any enemy humanity had ever faced. The Keth do not fight the way most species fight, Valara continued. They do not simply bombard worlds from orbit or fight clean battles in space. They land on planets and they hunt, taking pleasure in the terror of their victims, killing slowly and painfully because fear is as important to them as the kill itself. She placed her hand on the base of the statue. When we detected their ships approaching Centaura Prime, we sent our entire defense fleet to intercept them. We had the most advanced warships in the galaxy and weapons that could crack planets. And we were absolutely certain of our victory. What happened? Nathan asked. Though he already knew it would not be a happy story, the Keth had developed new stealth technology, Valara said. While we engaged their main fleet in space, 3 of their landing ships slipped past our defenses and reached the surface of Centaura Prime. Her voice grew quieter, heavier. By the time we realized what had happened, over 2,000 Keth warriors were on the ground, spreading out through the population centers, hunting our people in their own homes. Nathan looked at the walls covered in names, and suddenly the scale of the tragedy became real to him in a way that reports and briefings never could have made it. We tried to help from orbit, Valara said. We tried to use our weapons to target the Keth, but they had already spread too far. And our orbital weapons are not designed for precision. They are designed to destroy everything in a target area. She turned to face Nathan, and he saw tears running down her silver-blue cheeks. We faced an impossible choice, Commander. We could destroy our own cities and kill the Keth along with millions of our own people. Or we could do nothing and watch the Keth hunt down everyone on the planet. What did you do? We tried to evacuate, Valara said. We sent every transport we had down to the surface. And for 40 hours straight, we pulled people off that world while the Keth drew closer and closer to the evacuation points. She gestured at the walls. We saved 40 million people. Commander, 40 million out of 70 million. And these names you see around you are the 30 million who did not make it, who died because we had no one capable of fighting the Keth on the ground. Nathan walked closer to the wall and looked at the names, each one representing a person who had lived and loved and died in terror because their protectors had never learned how to protect them from an enemy that walked among them. This statue, Valara said, depicts a Valorian named Korath. He was a ceremonial guard, trained only for parades and formal occasions. But when the Keth reached the final evacuation point, he stood in the doorway and fought them with nothing but an ancient blade and his own courage. How long did he hold? 7 minutes, Valara said. 7 minutes against creatures twice his size with claws that could cut through our strongest armor. And in those 7 minutes, he killed 19 of them before they finally brought him down. Her voice cracked with emotion. 7 minutes was enough for the last transport to launch, carrying 3,000 people to safety. 3,000 lives saved because one Valorian refused to run. Nathan understood now why he was here. And it was not simply about teaching combat techniques or military tactics. You want to make sure it never happens again. I want my people to be able to fight, Valara said. I want them to be able to stand their ground when the enemy comes. not because they have shields or advanced weapons, but because they have the training and the courage to face death and not run. She walked toward Nathan and placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture that he knew from his studies was very significant in Valorian culture. Humans have always known how to fight on the ground, she said. Your entire history is filled with stories of soldiers who held the line against impossible odds, who sacrificed themselves to protect the people they loved. That is what I need you to teach my people. I will do everything I can. Nathan said. I know you will, Commander, Valara replied. And that is why my daughter will learn to respect you, not because I commanded, but because she will come to understand what you represent. She looked back at the statue of Korath. You represent hope. Commander Cole, hope that when the Keth come again, and they will come again, my people will be ready to meet them, not just in space, but in the streets and fields and homes where the real battle will be fought. Nathan looked at the 30 million names surrounding him and made a silent promise to every single one of them. He would teach the Valorians how to fight, and he would make sure that no memorial would ever need to be built again. 3 weeks had passed since Nathan arrived on Valoria Prime, and in that time, he had transformed an empty training hall into something that looked like the military facilities. Back on Earth, 30 Valorian volunteers stood before him every morning. Young men and women who had answered the call to become something their species had never had before. Ground soldiers capable of fighting when their technology failed them. Among them stood Lyra. And her presence was not because she had volunteered. High Counselor Valara had made it very clear to her daughter that participation in the training program was not optional, and that her future political privileges depended on her completing every lesson. Nathan had to teach. Nathan had watched Lyra carefully during those first weeks, expecting her to cause problems or refuse to follow instructions. But something unexpected had happened instead. She was trying, not happily, and certainly not without complaint. But she showed up every day, and she pushed herself harder than most of the other trainees, almost as if she was trying to prove something to herself rather than to anyone else. Today, we moved to hand-to-hand combat, Nathan announced to the assembled trainees. No weapons, no shields, nothing but your bodies and your training. A tall male Valorian named Corin raised his hand, and Nathan nodded for him to speak. Commander, I mean no disrespect, but our personal shield devices can stop most physical attacks. So why do we need to learn to fight without them? Nathan had been expecting this question because every Valorian he had met relied completely on their technology, never considering what might happen if that technology stopped working. Show me your shield. Corin pressed a button on his wrist device, and a shimmer of energy surrounded his body. The same shield technology that had made the Valorians feel invincible for thousands of years. Nathan walked toward him slowly, his movements relaxed and unthreatening, and the other trainees watched with confusion because they could not understand what he was planning to do when he was within arm's reach. Nathan moved his hand, shot out, and grabbed Corin's wrist, twisting it at a specific angle while applying pressure to a point on the device. And the shield flickered once and then died completely before Corin could react. Nathan swept his legs out from under him and pinned him to the floor, one hand on his throat in a position that could have been fatal if Nathan had wanted it to. Baby room went completely silent. Your shields have a 3-second reset delay after disruption, Nathan said, releasing Corin and helping him back to his feet. And I have just shown you one of 17 different ways to disrupt them. The Keth know all 17 ways and probably more that we have not discovered yet. He stepped back and addressed the entire class. The Keth have studied every species they hunt, and they have learned every weakness. They know about your shield emitters, and they know exactly where to strike to disable them. And in the 3 seconds it takes for your shields to reset, a Keth warrior can kill you 4 times over. Corin rubbed his wrist and looked at Nathan with new respect in his violet eyes. How did you learn to do that? Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history, Nathan said. We have had thousands of years of practice finding ways to defeat every defensive technology we create. And that experience is what I am here to share with you. The training that followed was unlike anything the Valorians had ever experienced. Nathan taught them how to fall without hurting themselves, how to roll and recover, how to use their natural strength and speed in ways they had never considered. He showed them the weak points of their own bodies and the bodies of the Keth, places where a single strike could disable or kill even without weapons. Day after day, week after week, the trainees improved, and Nathan felt a growing pride as he watched them transform from pampered civilians into something that resembled real soldiers. Lyra remained a puzzle to him throughout this time. She complained constantly, arguing with his methods and questioning his decisions. But she never missed a single training session, and she never gave up no matter how hard he pushed her. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of training, Nathan found her alone in the training hall, practicing the combat forms he had taught them. She did not notice him watching from the doorway, and he took the opportunity to study her technique. She was good, better than most of the other trainees. But she was holding back in some way that Nathan could not quite identify. "You are fighting yourself," he said. Stepping into the hall, Lyra spun around, her face flushing with embarrassment of being caught. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Nathan said, walking toward her. "You have the strength and the speed to be one of the best fighters in this class. But something is stopping you from using it. Perhaps I simply do not want to hurt anyone." "That is exactly the problem," Nathan said. "In real combat, hesitation kills. You can't afford to hold back because you are afraid of causing harm." He took a fighting stance in front of her. "Attack me. Full force. Do not hold back." Lyra stared at him for a long moment. "You are smaller than me and you do not have our physical strength. I could seriously hurt you." "Then hurt me." She attacked, her first strike fast but controlled, and Nathan deflected it easily, harder. Her second strike was stronger, and Nathan had to actually work to redirect it. "You can do better than that." Something changed in Lyra's eyes. A spark of real intensity that Nathan had been waiting to see. And suddenly she was fighting for real. Her strikes came faster and harder. And Nathan found himself pushed to his limits to keep up with her, because the Valorian physiology gave her advantages in speed and power that he could not match, but he had something she did not have yet. Experience and training that allowed him to predict her movements and stay one step ahead. They fought for several minutes, neither one gaining a clear advantage, until Lyra made a mistake. She overextended on a punch, leaving her side exposed. And Nathan saw the opening clearly, but he also saw something else in her eyes at that moment. Real focus, real determination. A fire that had been missing every time she had trained before. Instead of exploiting the opening, he stepped back and lowered his hands. "Better," he said. "Much better." Lyra was breathing hard, sweat running down her silver blue skin. But there was something new in her expression. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "I made a mistake." "You could have defeated me, because defeating you was not the point," Nathan said. "The point was getting you to stop holding back. And you finally did." He handed her a towel from a nearby rack. "You have been fighting against yourself this whole time, afraid of what you might become if you truly embraced this training. But there is nothing wrong with learning to fight. What matters is what you choose to fight for." Lyra wiped her face and looked at him. And for the first time since they had met, her eyes held no mockery or contempt. "I think I am beginning to understand why my mother wanted you here." "And what do you understand? That strength is not just about technology or superior weapons," Lyra said. "It is about the will to use that strength when it matters most. Even when you are afraid." Nathan smiled. "Now you are starting to think like a soldier." He walked toward the door, but stopped before leaving. Same time tomorrow. And this time I expect you to fight like you mean it from the very beginning." Lyra nodded. And Nathan saw something in her expression that looked almost like respected was a small thing, but it was a start. The alarms began screaming at exactly 3 hours past midnight, and Nathan was out of his bed and in his combat gear within 60 seconds, his body moving on instinct while his mind processed the emergency broadcasts coming through his communicator. 3 Keth infiltration ships had slipped past the orbital defense network using some kind of new stealth technology that the Valorians had never seen before, and they had landed in the agricultural district about 12 kilometers from the capital city. Initial reports suggested at least 200 Keth warriors on the ground and moving fast. Nathan ran through the corridors of the military complex, passing Valorians who looked confused and frightened because nothing like this had happened since the disaster at Centauri Prime over 50 years ago. He reached the command center to find High Counselor Valara already there, her face pale but her expression controlled as she studied the tactical displays showing the enemy movements. "Our orbital weapons cannot target them," she said without looking away from the screens. "They have spread out through the agricultural zones that feed 3 billion people. If we fire from orbit, we destroy the crops and condemn our people to starvation. How long until they reach the capital? At their current speed, perhaps 4 hours, but there are civilian settlements between here and there. Thousands of our people directly in their path." Nathan studied the display, watching the red dots that represented Keth warriors spreading out in a pattern he recognized from his training and preparation for this mission. It was a hunting formation, designed to cover maximum ground while maintaining enough mutual support that no group could be isolated and destroyed. "Your trainees," he said. "Are they ready?" Valara finally looked at him, and Nathan saw fear in her eyes. Not for herself, but for the young Valorians she had sent to him for training. "They've only been training for 6 weeks. That is not enough time." "No," Nathan agreed, "but they are all we have. And if we do not stop the Keth before they reach those settlements, thousands of people will die." The High Counselor closed her eyes for a moment, and Nathan could see her struggling with the weight of the decision. "What do you need?" "Transport to the forward agricultural station and every trainee who is willing to fight within the hour." Nathan stood before his 30 trainees at a small agricultural station, surrounded by fields of glowing purple crops that stretched to the horizon in every direction. Behind them, civilian transports were loading families and workers, trying to evacuate as many people as possible. Before the Keth arrived, Lyra stood at the front of the group, her face serious and determined. And Nathan felt a moment of pride when he looked at her, because she was no longer the arrogant young woman who had mocked him on his first day. "I will not lie to you," Nathan said, his voice carrying clearly across the group. "What we are about to face is dangerous, and some of us may not survive this day." No one moved or spoke. "The Keth are coming? Over 200 of them, and we are only 31. The numbers are not in our favor, and if any of you want to leave, I will not think less of you." Still no one moved. "Good," Nathan said. "Then let me tell you what we are going to do. We are not trying to defeat the Keth today. Our mission is to delay them. Every minute we hold them here is another minute for civilians to reach safety. Every minute is another life saved." Corin stepped forward. "What is our strategy?" "Commander, we make them pay for every step they take," Nathan said. "The Keth are predators. They expect their prey to run. They do not expect prey that fights back with discipline and determination." He pointed at the agricultural buildings and storage facilities surrounding them. "We use the terrain to create choke points and kill zones. We force them to come at us in small groups where we can match their strength, and we fall back in an organized fashion when necessary, always making them work for every meter of ground they take." He assigned positions to each trainee, placing his strongest fighters at key defensive points and keeping a small reserve. Forced to respond to any breakthroughs, it was not a perfect defense. And Nathan knew it would not hold forever. But it did not need to hold forever. It only needed to hold long enough. The first Keth scouts appeared as the sun began to set. Casting long shadows across the purple fields, Nathan watched them through his targeting scope. And his stomach tightened as he got his first clear look at the enemy. They were massive. Nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through armor like paper. And their eyes glowed with a red light that spoke of predatory intelligence and hunger. "Hold your fire," Nathan said through the communication system. "Let them commit to the approach." The scouts moved forward with the confidence of creatures that had never faced organized resistance on the ground, spreading out to identify targets and test the defenses. The lead scout stepped into the primary kill zone. Now, 30 weapons fired simultaneously, and the night exploded with light and sound. The first wave of scouts fell, but more Keth poured out of the darkness behind them. Howling with rage as they charged toward the defensive positions, Nathan fired again and again, dropping one enemy after another, but they kept coming. Seemingly endless waves of claws and teeth and fury. First squad fall back to secondary positions, he ordered as the Keth reached the forward barricades. Second squad, covering fire. The trainees moved exactly as he had taught them, withdrawing in good order while their comrades kept the enemy engaged. Nathan felt a fierce pride watching them fight because 6 weeks ago they had been civilians who had never held weapons. And now they were soldiers holding the line against one of the most feared species in the galaxy. A Keth warrior broke through on the left flank, and Nathan saw Lyra move to intercept it. She was fast, faster than he had realized during training, and her first strike took the creature in its knee joint, bringing it down to her level. The Keth lashed out with all 4 arms, but Lyra was already moving, dodging and weaving as she looked for an opening. When she found it, she did not hesitate. Her blade found the creature's throat, and it fell. And she was already turning to face the next enemy before the body hit the ground. "Keep moving," Nathan shouted. "Do not let them pin you down." The battle raged on through the night, and Nathan lost track of time as he fought and moved and fought again. His arm was hit by a glancing blow from a Keth claw at some point, sending waves of pain through his body. But he pushed through it because stopping meant dying. By the time the sky began to lighten, they had fallen back to their third defensive position, and Nathan took a moment to count his remaining people. 22 trainees still standing out of 38 had fallen during the night, including Corin, who had died holding a barricade, alone for 3 full minutes. While his squad mates escaped to safety, Nathan looked at the bodies of the Keth scattered across the ground between their positions and the edge of the fields. There were dozens of them, perhaps 100 or more, killed by people who had only been soldiers for 6 weeks. They had done the impossible, and they were still fighting. "Commander," one of the trainees called out. "Look." Nathan turned to see lights in the sky, dozens of them, descending toward the battlefield. The Valorian fleet had finally found a way to target the Keth without destroying the crops, using precision strike craft that could hit individual enemies from above. The remaining Keth, seeing their defeat coming, tried to scatter, but there was nowhere for them to hide within minutes. It was over. Nathan sat down heavily on a broken barricade and let the exhaustion finally wash over him. They had held the line, and the civilians were safe. That was all that mattered. Nathan woke up in a medical facility 3 days after the battle, his body wrapped in bandages and connected to machines that hummed softly as they worked to repair the damage he had taken during the fight. His arm had been broken in 2 places, and he had lost enough blood to kill a normal person twice over. But the Valorian doctors had saved him using medical technology far beyond anything available on Earthly Counselor Valara sat in a chair beside his bed, and from the tired look in her eyes, Nathan suspected she had been there for quite some time. "How long have you been watching me sleep?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Long enough to know that you talk in your sleep," Valar said, with a small smile. "Mostly tactical commands and something about someone named Linda back on Earth." Nathan laughed and then winced because laughing hurt his broken ribs. "My mother," he explained. "She always worried I would get myself killed doing something heroic and stupid." "She sounds like a wise woman," Valara said. "I would like to meet her someday." There was a long moment of silence as Nathan gathered the courage to ask the question that had been weighing on his mind since he woke up. "How many did we lose?" Valara's expression grew serious. 8 of your trainees died during the battle, including Corrin, who held his position alone for 3 minutes while his squad mates retreated to safety. Nathan closed his eyes and felt the weight of those deaths pressing down on him. 8 young people who had trusted him to teach them how to survive. And he had led them into a battle where they died. "I failed them." "No," Valara said firmly. "You gave them the chance to die as warriors, protecting their people in Valorian culture. There is no higher honor than to fall in defense of those who cannot defend themselves." She reached out and took his hand, a gesture of intimacy that Nathan knew was significant in her culture. Those 8 soldiers saved over 12,000 civilian lives last night, and they will be remembered in Memorial of Heroes alongside Korath himself. Nathan opened his eyes and looked at her. "And the others, the ones who survived, they are being treated for their injuries, but all of them will recover. And every single one of them has asked when they can return to training." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Nathan turned his head to see Lyra standing in the doorway, looking uncertain and hesitant in a way he had never seen before. "May I come in?" Valara stood and gave her daughter a warm smile. "I will leave you two to talk. There are matters I must attend to in the council, but I will return later." "Commander." She walked past Lyra with a gentle touch on her shoulder, and then they were alone. Lyra moved slowly into the room, her violet eyes fixed on Nathan with an expression that held none of the mockery or contempt from their first meeting. She sat down in the chair her mother had vacated and was silent. "For a long moment, I owe you an apology," she finally said. "For what?" "For everything," Lyra said. "For the way I treated you when you arrived. For the disrespect I showed you and your species. For believing that technology and advanced weapons were all that mattered in warfare." She looked down at her hands. "When those Keth broke through our lines last night, I was terrified, more afraid than I have ever been in my entire life. And for a moment I wanted to run. I wanted to drop my weapon and flee and let someone else deal with the problem. But you did not run." "No," Lyra said, "because I remembered what you taught us about holding the line, about fighting for something bigger than ourselves. And I realized that if I ran, people would die." She looked up and met his eyes. "I killed 11 Keth last night, Commander. 11 enemies who would have gone on to murder civilians if I had not stopped them. And I know that is because of you." Nathan shook his head. "I taught you the techniques, but you found the courage on your own. That is not something anyone can give you." "Perhaps," Lyra said, "but you showed me that it was possible. You showed me that being a warrior is not about being stronger or faster or having better technology. It is about being willing to stand between the darkness and the people you love." She stood and performed a deep bow, a gesture of profound respect in Valorian culture that Nathan had only seen used for the most honored individuals. "I was wrong about humans. Commander Cole, I was wrong about you. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure that every Valorian understands what your species has to teach us." Nathan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That is all I ever wanted. To help your people protect themselves." The door opened again, and Valara returned with several other Valorian officials following behind her. I hope I am not interrupting, she said, though the slight smile on her face suggested she knew exactly what she was interrupting. Not at all. High Counselor Valara moved to stand at the foot of Nathan's bed, and her expression became formal and official. Commander Nathan Cole, in recognition of your service to the Valorian people, and in honor of the soldiers who gave their lives under your command, the Grand Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity a full military alliance. Nathan stared at her in surprise. Not as advisors or subordinates, Valara continued, but as equal partners in all matters of defense. The human military will be honored throughout the Valorian collective as brothers and sisters in arms. She paused and looked at him with warmth in her eyes. And you, Commander, will be given a permanent position as head of the Valorian Ground Forces Academy. If you choose to accept it. Nathan thought about Earth, about his mother and his friends and everything he would be leaving behind, and then he thought about the memorial of Centaur Prime, about the 30 million names carved in silver light, about the 8 young soldiers who had died trusting him to lead them. I accept, he said. Lyra stepped forward and placed something in his hand. A small medallion made of the same black stone as the memorial. This belonged to Korath, she said. It has been held in trust by my family since his death, waiting for someone worthy to wear it. Nathan looked at the medallion, and then at the young woman who had once mocked him as a primitive from a lesser species. I do not know if I deserve this. You do, Lyra said. Not because of what you did last night, but because of what you taught us. You taught us that true strength comes from the willingness to sacrifice everything for those who cannot protect themselves. And that is a lesson my people will never forget. Nathan closed his fingers around the medallion and made a silent promise to the man who had once owned it. Would build an army that would make sure no memorial would ever need to be carved again, and in the years that followed, he kept that promise. The alliance between humans and Valorians became the foundation of a new era of peace and security, not because of advanced technology or superior weapons, but because of the simple lesson that one human soldier had taught to a civilization of stars, that courage matters more than power, and that the willingness to stand and fight for others is the greatest strength any species can possess. Lyra eventually became High Counselor herself, and in her acceptance speech, she told the story of the human who had come to teach her people how to fight. He showed us that we did not need to be ashamed of learning from a younger species, she said, because wisdom is not measured in years or technology. It is measured in the willingness to protect what matters most. And throughout the Valorian collective, children learned the story of Commander Nathan Cole, the human who stood against the darkness when everyone else wanted to run, the human who taught an ancient civilization the true meaning of respect.